She's the fall guy. File the charges Friday and delete her emails. I froze behind the server rack, network cable still in my hand. It was 11:47 p.m. I was supposed to be alone. The building was supposed to be empty. I was just updating the backup protocols because apparently that's what IT directors do on a Tuesday night when normal people are watching Netflix. But the boardroom lights were on, and the door was cracked open just enough for voices to carry. She's clueless, doesn't suspect a thing. That was Richard Holbrook, CEO, the man who'd hired me 3 years ago and called me the best technology investment this company ever made. The offshore accounts all trace back to her credentials. By the time the auditors figure out she didn't actually do it, the real money will be in Zurich. That was Victoria Chen, Chief Financial Officer, the woman who'd brought me cake on my birthday last month. What about the emails? A third voice, Gregory Dunn, General Counsel, the man I'd helped recover deleted files for just last week. Already prepared, dated correspondence showing she planned the whole thing. We upload them to her account, delete the originals, and let the FBI find exactly what we want them to find. Laughter. Actual laughter. Poor Sloane. She really thought we kept her around for her technical skills. More laughter. I stood there, in the dark, behind $47,000 worth of server equipment, listening to the people I'd trusted plan to destroy my life. They were going to frame me for embezzlement. They were going to manufacture evidence. They were going to send me to prison for crimes I didn't commit. And they thought I was clueless. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it through the walls. I had 2 options. Option 1, panic, run, call a lawyer, try to defend myself against people with unlimited resources and a head start. Option 2, remember that I was the IT director, that I had access to every system in this building, that these idiots had just confessed their crimes within range of the server room where every conversation was automatically backed up to redundant cloud storage. Because I'd configured it that way. Last year, for disaster recovery purposes. I put down the network cable, walked quietly back to my desk, and made one small change to the backup retention policy. Instead of overwriting audio files after 7 days, I set it to never. Then I made a few other small changes. By Wednesday afternoon, Richard Holbrook would learn an important lesson about technology. The clueless IT person controls everything. Before I explain how 3 executives ended up in federal custody while I ended up with a rather generous wrongful termination settlement, let me just say, if you've ever been underestimated at work, if you've ever been treated like the computer person who doesn't need to be included in important conversations, you're going to enjoy this. Consider subscribing. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, every new person who joins makes me feel like slightly less of a fall guy in the YouTube algorithm. Now, let me tell you how a clueless IT director brought down a conspiracy. My name is Sloane Mitchell. I was 31 years old when I overheard my own professional execution being planned by people I'd considered colleagues. I'd worked at Vanguard Financial Solutions for 3 years. Good company, or so I thought. Mid-size investment management firm. About 200 employees, $1.2 billion in assets under management. My job was keeping the technology running. Servers, networks, security systems, the digital infrastructure that made everything possible. It wasn't glamorous work. Nobody noticed when things worked, they only noticed when things broke, which meant my job was to be invisible, to fix problems before anyone knew they existed. I was very good at being invisible. Too good, apparently. The thing about being the IT person is that people forget you exist. They talk in front of you like you're part of the furniture. They leave sensitive documents on printers because they assume you're not paying attention. They discuss confidential matters in rooms where they don't realize the systems are recording.
I'd learned more about Vanguard's internal politics from overheard conversations than from any official meeting, but I'd never learned anything like this. I spent that night doing research. Quiet research, the kind that doesn't show up in system logs unless you know exactly where to look. And since I'd designed the logging system, I knew exactly where not to look. The offshore accounts they'd mentioned traced to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The shell company had been created 18 months ago. The signatory documents bore my digital signature, except I'd never signed them. They'd forged my credentials, used my access to create the accounts, moved money in patterns that would look to any investigator like I was systematically embezzling from client portfolios. $4.7 million. Gone, and every digital breadcrumb led directly to me. I could have panicked, probably should have panicked. A normal person would have called a lawyer at midnight and started building a defense, but I wasn't a normal person. I was an IT director who'd spent 3 years making this company's technology actually work. I knew every system, every backup, every hidden log that nobody else even knew existed. And I knew something Richard Holbrook didn't. When you're framing someone for a crime, you should probably make sure they don't control the evidence. Wednesday morning, I arrived at work at my usual time, 8:15 a.m. Coffee from the place down the street, normal routine. Victoria Chen smiled at me in the elevator. "Morning, Sloane. How was your night?" "Quiet, just some server maintenance." "You work too hard." "Someone has to keep the lights on." She laughed. The same laugh I'd heard from the boardroom, the one that came after poor Sloane. I smiled back. "Have a good day, Victoria." I went to my desk, did my job, answered tickets, fixed problems, attended a meeting about network security, where Gregory Dunn asked detailed questions about our backup policies. So if someone deleted emails, we could recover them? Depends on timing. Our retention policy keeps deleted items for 30 days. After that, they're permanently removed. And there's no way to accelerate that for, say, compliance reasons? We'd need CFO approval to modify retention policies. It's in the security documentation. He nodded, made a note. I knew exactly what he was planning. Delete my emails, accelerate the purge, make sure there was nothing left that could contradict their manufactured evidence. Too bad he didn't know about the secondary backup system, the one that ran on a server nobody else knew about, the one that captured everything. I'd installed it 2 years ago after a ransomware scare. CEO-level paranoia about losing critical data. Richard had approved the budget without really understanding what he was approving, which was basically a complete mirror of every email, every document, every database transaction, stored off-site, encrypted, untouchable by anyone except me, including the emails that would prove my innocence, and the ones that would prove their guilt. Thursday morning, I could feel the tension building. Richard Holbrook walked past my desk 3 times. Each time he glanced at me with an expression I now recognized as guilt mixed with anticipation, the look of someone counting down to something. 1 more day until Friday, 1 more day until they filed whatever charges they were planning, 1 more day until my life was supposed to fall apart. Victoria requested a meeting with IT about archival policies. Gregory sent an email asking about data destruction timelines. The CFO of a major financial firm suddenly interested in how long we kept backup tapes. They weren't even being subtle. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed one more piece. I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away, not just the audio from the server room, not just the backup emails. I needed something that would prove beyond any doubt that they had planned and executed a conspiracy. I needed them to put it in writing. Thursday afternoon, I sent Gregory Dunn an email.
Hi, Gregory. Following up on our conversation about retention policies, I've drafted a proposal for accelerated deletion that would meet compliance requirements while reducing our storage costs. Would you like me to present it to the board? His response came in 11 minutes. Excellent work, Sloane. Yes, please prepare a presentation for tomorrow's board meeting, 2 p.m. Focus on the email retention changes. That's the priority. I almost laughed out loud. They were going to have me present the mechanism for destroying my own evidence in front of the entire board, with minutes being taken. And then they were going to file charges based on evidence that I'd supposedly hidden. It was actually a good plan, if I'd been as clueless as they thought. Friday morning, I arrived early, 6:30 a.m. The building was empty except for security. I had work to do. First, I accessed the secondary backup server, downloaded everything relevant, the emails, the audio files, the financial transaction logs that showed exactly how the money had moved and whose actual credentials had authorized it. Richard Holbrook's, not mine. They'd cloned my Access profile to create the offshore accounts, but they'd made one mistake. The actual fund transfers had been initiated from Richard's workstation, his IP address, his hardware ID, because they were lazy and because they assumed nobody would ever look that closely. Second, I packaged everything into an encrypted archive, uploaded it to 3 separate cloud services, emailed copies to 2 attorneys I'd quietly retained on Monday, and sent one very special package to the SEC's whistleblower division. Third, I prepared my presentation, the one about email retention policies, with a few extra slides I'd added myself. 2 p.m., Friday. The boardroom. The same boardroom where I'd overheard my own destruction being planned. The same chairs, the same table, the same people who'd laughed about me being clueless. Richard Holbrook sat at the head of the table, Victoria Chen to his right, Gregory Dunn to his left. 6 other board members filled the remaining seats. And me, standing at the front, laptop connected to the projector. Thank you all for joining us, Richard said. Sloane has prepared a presentation on our data retention policies. Sloane, please go ahead. Thank you, Richard. I clicked to the first slide. Standard corporate template. Boring header. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that data retention is often overlooked. Most employees don't think about where their emails go, what happens to deleted files, how long the company keeps records. Click. Next slide. But it matters because everything we do creates a digital trail, and that trail can tell a story. Sometimes it's a story we want told, and sometimes... Click. The slide showed a transcript, the audio from Tuesday night, the conversation I'd overheard from behind the server rack. Sometimes it's a story we'd rather keep hidden. The room went silent. Richard's face lost all color. Victoria's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Gregory's pen dropped from his fingers. She's the fall guy. File the charges Friday and delete her emails. I read the words aloud. Those were your exact words, Richard, at 11:52 p.m. on Tuesday, in this very room. How? Richard's voice came out as a whisper. The server room has backup audio recording for disaster recovery. You approved the budget yourself 2 years ago. I have the equipment requisition with your signature. I clicked to the next slide, a network diagram. This shows the actual origin of the fund transfers to the Cayman Islands, not my workstation. Your workstation, Richard. Your IP address, your hardware signature. Click. Financial records. This shows the creation of the shell company. The digital signature was forged using my credentials, but the creation timestamp matches a day I was on vacation in Hawaii, with timestamped photos on my Instagram that prove I was 4,000 miles away. Click. Email threads. And this is the internal correspondence between the 3 of you, planning the entire scheme, recovered from the backup system you didn't know existed. Gregory Dunn stood up. "This is outrageous! You violated company policy by recording." "I've violated nothing. The recording system was approved by the board. It's documented in the IT infrastructure plan that you all signed off on. Page 47, Section 12, subsection C, audio backup for disaster recovery purposes." He sat back down. Richard Holbrook was trying to regain control. I could see it in his face, the calculation, the search for an angle. "Sloane, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you heard something that concerned you, we should discuss it privately." "We're well past private discussions, Richard." I clicked to the final slide. "At 9 a.m. this morning, I submitted a comprehensive evidence package to the SEC's Whistleblower Division. At 9:15, I sent copies to the FBI's White Collar Crime Unit. At 9:30, I forwarded everything to the attorneys representing Vanguard's institutional clients, who I suspect will be very interested in how their money was being managed." The room erupted. Board members started shouting. Victoria was crying. Gregory was on his phone, presumably calling his personal attorney. Richard just stared at me. "You were supposed to be clueless." "I know. That's what made this possible." I unplugged my laptop, gathered my things. "One more thing. I've scheduled all evidence files to automatically release to major financial media outlets at 5 p.m. today. The only way to stop it is a code that only I possess. If I'm detained, arrested, or otherwise prevented from entering that code, the release happens automatically." Richard's face twisted. "That's blackmail." "No, Richard. Blackmail would be demanding money to stay quiet. I don't want your money. I want you to face consequences." I walked toward the door. "The media release will be stopped only after I've confirmed that federal authorities have taken custody of all relevant parties. Consider it an insurance policy." I paused at the threshold. "Oh, and the charges you were planning to file today? I'd suggest dropping those. The evidence you manufactured is now part of the federal investigation, as proof of conspiracy. Fabricating evidence is its own felony, separate from the embezzlement." I smiled. "Have a good weekend." I walked out. Behind me, I could hear the chaos intensifying, raised voices, accusations flying, the beautiful sound of a conspiracy eating itself alive. The elevator doors closed, and I allowed myself one small moment of satisfaction. The clueless IT person had just brought down 3 executives, and it wasn't even 3 p.m. The federal agents arrived at 4:17 p.m. I watched from the coffee shop across the street, sipping a latte, enjoying the show. Richard Holbrook was escorted out first, hands cuffed behind his back, the same hands that had signed my performance reviews, the same hands that had shaken mine when I'd been promoted. Victoria Chen came next, mascara running, the composed CFO reduced to tears. Gregory Dunn went quietly, lawyer already on the phone, probably negotiating the terms of whatever cooperation deal would keep him out of prison the longest. The media arrived 20 minutes later, cameras, microphones, the full circus. I didn't talk to any of them, didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. By evening, the story was everywhere. Vanguard financial executives arrested in embezzlement scheme. Whistleblower exposes $4.7 million fraud. IT Director uncovers plot to frame her. That last one was my favorite. The SEC investigation took 8 months. The trial took another year. All 3 executives were convicted. Richard Holbrook, 18 years. Embezzlement, securities fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Victoria Chen, 12 years. She'd cooperated eventually, but not soon enough. Gregory Dunn, 6 years. He'd flipped quickly and testified against the others. The company survived, barely. New leadership, new board, complete restructuring of financial controls.
and a very generous settlement for the IT director they'd tried to frame. I can't disclose the exact number, the NDA is quite specific, but I can say that it had more zeros than my original salary had digits, which felt appropriate. The whistleblower reward was separate, 15% of recovered funds. The SEC had clawed back $3.2 million from various offshore accounts. Do the math. I took 6 months off, traveled, read books, learned to cook things that weren't microwaved, processed the trauma of nearly having my life destroyed by people I'd trusted. Then I went back to work. Not at Vanguard, not at any company, actually. I started my own consulting firm, specialized in internal security assessments, helping companies find the vulnerabilities that bad actors exploit. You'd be amazed how many executives forget that IT can see everything, I told potential clients, and you'd be amazed how many embezzlement schemes fall apart because someone didn't understand how backup systems work. Business was good.
People ask me sometimes what would have happened if I hadn't stayed late that Tuesday, if I'd gone home at 5 like normal, if I'd updated the servers the next day, if I'd never heard that conversation. I'd be in prison, probably, serving time for crimes I didn't commit, destroyed by people I'd trusted, another victim of corporate fraud with no way to prove my innocence. The evidence they'd manufactured was good, really good. Without the audio recording, without the backup logs, without access to the systems that showed what actually happened, I'd have had nothing but my word against theirs. And in a he said, she said against 3 executives with lawyers and resources, the IT person rarely wins. But I got lucky. Wrong place at the right time. Overheard exactly what I needed to hear, exactly when I could still do something about it. Luck isn't a strategy, though, so I've made sure I'll never need to get that lucky again. My consulting firm emphasizes one thing above all else: assume someone is watching, assume someone is recording, assume that every digital action leaves a trail that can be followed. Because it's true. The technology we all use, the systems we all depend on, they remember everything. The question is just who has access to that memory. Richard Holbrooke thought he controlled the narrative. He thought destroying emails and manufacturing evidence would be enough. He forgot that the person he was framing was the one who understood the technology best. He thought I was just the IT person. He was wrong. I was the IT person, the one who configured every system, the one who knew where the bodies were buried, digitally speaking, the one who could retrieve deleted files, recover overwritten data, and reconstruct timelines that criminals thought they'd erased. When you're planning to frame someone, you should probably choose a fall guy who doesn't control the infrastructure. That's just basic operational security. I visited Gregory Dunn once, about 2 years into his sentence. Federal prison, minimum security, nice enough as prisons go. He was surprised to see me. Sloane, I didn't expect. I have questions, things that weren't in the trial testimony. He nodded. We sat in the visiting room, guards nearby but not hovering. Why me? Out of everyone in the company, why did you choose to frame me specifically? Gregory was quiet for a moment. You were perfect. Technical enough to plausibly commit the crime, junior enough to not have connections that would complicate things, and... He hesitated. And what? And you were invisible. You'd worked there 3 years, and half the board couldn't remember your name. Richard used to call you the computer girl when you weren't around. The computer girl. We needed someone who wouldn't be missed, someone who didn't have the relationships or resources to fight back effectively, someone who'd take the fall quietly because they didn't know any other option. You thought I was weak. We thought you were powerless. He shrugged. We were wrong. How long had you been planning it?
The scheme itself, about 2 years. Selecting you specifically, about 8 months. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. You were never supposed to find out until it was too late. The audio recording, we checked every other room. We never thought to check near the servers. Because you didn't understand how the systems worked? Because we didn't think we needed to. That was your job. We just needed you to take the blame. I stood up. Thank you for your honesty, Gregory. For what it's worth, Sloane, I'm sorry. Not just because I got caught. What we tried to do to you was wrong. You didn't deserve it. I looked at him. This man who had helped plan my destruction, who had laughed about me being clueless, who had asked me about data retention policies while plotting to manufacture evidence against me. No, I didn't. I left without looking back.
3 years after the trial, I got an invitation I didn't expect. A technology conference, major event. They wanted me to give a keynote about cybersecurity and corporate governance. The Invisible Guardian, how IT professionals can protect their companies and themselves. I almost declined. Public speaking wasn't my strength. I was an IT person. I liked being invisible. But then I thought about all the other IT people out there, the ones working late nights, the ones being overlooked, the ones who might someday find themselves in a situation like mine. Maybe they needed to hear this story. The conference center held 2,000 people, every seat filled. I stood backstage, heart pounding, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Then I walked out. 3 years ago, I was working late on a server update when I overheard my company's board of directors planning to frame me for embezzlement. The audience went silent. They called me clueless. They laughed about how easy it would be. They were absolutely certain that the IT person couldn't possibly stop them. I clicked to the first slide. A simple statement. They were wrong. For the next 45 minutes, I told my story. Every detail, the fear, the planning, the moment I walked into that boardroom and watched their faces fall. I talked about what I'd learned, about the importance of documentation, about understanding your own systems, about never underestimating the power of being just the technical person. Every executive in that room had an MBA, I said. They'd spent years learning about business strategy and financial management, but none of them understood how their own technology worked. They didn't know about the backup systems. They didn't understand digital forensics. They thought deleting an email meant it was gone forever. I looked out at the audience. That ignorance cost them their freedom. It could just as easily have cost me mine. The applause lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, dozens of IT professionals came up to share their own stories, smaller versions of mine, times they'd been overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted. You gave us a voice, one woman said. You showed that we matter. I hadn't expected that, hadn't expected to become some kind of symbol. But maybe that was okay. Maybe being visible for once was exactly what was needed. I keep a copy of the audio transcript in my desk drawer, the one from that Tuesday night, the words that almost destroyed me. She's the fall guy. She's clueless. Poor Sloane. Not as a reminder of what they tried to do, as a reminder of what I did instead. When they expected me to crumble, I planned. When they expected me to be powerless, I gathered evidence. When they expected me to be their victim, I became their undoing. The IT person they dismissed, the computer girl they forgot existed, the clueless employee who turned out to understand everything. I think about Richard Holbrook sometimes, sitting in his cell. 18 years is a long time. He'll be in his 70s when he gets out, assuming good behavior. I wonder if he's figured out yet where he went wrong. Not the embezzlement, not the conspiracy. Those were just crimes. His real mistake was underestimating the invisible people, the ones who keep the lights on,
the ones who fix the problems nobody else understands, the ones who know where all the digital bodies are buried. He thought being invisible meant being powerless. He learned otherwise. I still work in technology, still spend my days thinking about systems and security and all the ways things can go wrong. But I'm not invisible anymore, don't want to be, because there's power in being seen, in having a voice, in being the person who walks into a boardroom and makes executives very, very nervous. Richard called me the fall guy. He was right about one thing: someone definitely fell, just not me. If this story entertained you or made you feel slightly better about your own workplace drama, consider subscribing. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, which I'm told is the point where the YouTube algorithm stops treating me like a fall guy and actually recommends our videos. Drop a comment with your own "they thought I was clueless" moment, the time someone underestimated you and lived to regret it. I read every single one, usually while pretending to update servers. Share this with every IT person you know, every overlooked employee, every invisible worker who keeps everything running while getting none of the credit. They need to know. Sometimes the fall guy lands on their feet, and sometimes they bring everyone else down with them. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. And remember, always be nice to your IT department. We know where the backups are.